Peace and healing, peace and healing. It is Twilight. Today's topic is healing liquid self-esteem. Now, I introduced this concept in a prior video. You can actually click in the description box below to watch that video. It is a concept that talks about the strength of our self-esteem. Many of us call it high self-esteem or low self-esteem, but I think that a more accurate description is liquid versus solid self-esteem. Basically, liquid self-esteem is where you garner your self-esteem cues from the external world, and you conform and shape that self-esteem to whatever container you are in. Much like water conforms to its container. Why is this a problem? It will cause you to oftentimes go against what is morally righteous and right for you in an attempt to do and be what's pleasing to the crowd. Having your self-esteem be based on external things can be extremely problematic. So you're constantly scrambling to feel good about yourself through something that you absolutely have no control over. So unless we do this deep dive into our shadows and look at what our self-esteem is based on, we're going to be a little bit more subject to things such as depression and anxiety, and we will be totally vibrationally incompatible with what is right for us, because an emotion or an energy like depression and anxiety, those are heavier emotions, and they don't generally connect to prosperity, nor do they connect to the feelings and the elation of love or abundance. So if you're not trying to live a life that is as volatile as Bitcoin, okay, then you definitely want to invest more in building up solid self-esteem. So you can check the description box and click the video prior to get a full explanation of what these particular things mean and why it's important to evaluate if that is where your self-esteem cues are coming from. Now, solid self-esteem is based on your internal wealth, where you stand compared to your past self, your own growth, your own genuine connections, liking yourself, authentic self. We have a term, a colloquial term in popular society called staying in your lane. And I believe that solid self-esteem is a great example of what it means to stay in your lane. When you are solid within yourself about who you are, where you're going, you know people who mean you well. You're surrounding yourself with abundance. You're surrounding yourself with people who add value to your life. You are garnering your self-esteem from your own growth. Because see, your growth is something you control. When you can pull your self-esteem from those particular cues, you're solid. Therefore, when you're in a container that causes or asks you to compromise and it goes against your righteousness, you're not going to do it, or you'd be less likely to do it. You understand? So with that being said, this puts you in a position of what? Empowerment. And what do we talk about here? Transformation to empowerment. How do you transform from caring so much about where you stand and how you look to others financially to your own interior wealth? Well, it is quite simple. First, you must get to the root of the issue. Do you have a fear of rejection? Many people are operating with a fear of rejection and a fear of failure. And I have to tell you, not being able to cope with those two things is the exact reason why many individuals have not truly aligned to the prosperity that they can reach in life. What you must understand is if we are in a society that is socially programmed a certain way, if you go off the grid in any way, you will be, oftentimes, it'll be noticed. You'll oftentimes be scrutinized or ostracized for having a stance that is not a proud part of crowd consciousness, or the mentality of the herd, the mentality of the sheeple. If you begin to formulate yourself in just a slightly different way, your thinking changes. The conversations you have changes. Your priorities change. And oftentimes you are not able to relate to individuals who have not yet put themselves in certain specific positions to raise their consciousness or grow in a certain way. Does that make you disloyal? Does that make you thinking you're too good? Does that make you a person who forgot where they came from? Hell no, it doesn't. And I'm going to speak very clearly and candidly about being in the Black community. Being in the Black community, you can be looked upon as someone who is phony, fake, or trying too hard just by bettering yourself. And it's a ridiculous concept. And many of us try to water down who we are just so that we can appear to fit in. For example, in the Black community, it is fugazi to have intelligence. As crazy as this sounds, it is fugazi to have intelligence. When you're around people who have limited resources, limited education, they may feel triggered or inferior by your level of growth or intelligence. And yes, this is hard for me to admit because it doesn't look good to say this truth about, my own culture, but we have some growing to do. And unfortunately, we can't run away from the truth about our own shortcomings. Otherwise, we'd never improve them. So it's ingrained in your consciousness. You at the cookout, you want to talk about politics. You want to talk about spiritual enlightenment, and most of your family is in church, and or they have no interest in politics or anything that is outside of the normal cultural context that we seem to be extremely comfortable with. So you just have to get to a point where you have a healthy sense of self, whereby you can accept rejection, whereby you can accept failure. When it comes to this whole idea of being rejected, you got to realize that at some point you were looking for validation from them. It's not your job to change the mindset of people who are asleep. If they are asleep, let them rest. You have to recognize that you're not going to get kudos from people who have not yet lifted their consciousness to a specific type of level. And this is the reason why you have to be very secure within yourself when you go on this journey of growth and development, especially with the nature and the mentality of our particular culture as melanated people. You have to understand that we're traumatized and abused people. Our thinking has been twisted. So to come to people with right consciousness and look for them to validate the path that you are on, you absolutely will not get it. And it's not purposeful. It is just that their mentality is not where your mentality is. So it's not like it's a purposeful hit against you, although they may react strongly and they may come to you with a lot of negative energy. You may have to set healthy boundaries. You may have to stay away for a little while. But these are the actions and the behaviors that you have to do to readjust so that you can align to a more formidable vibration for yourself. It should be mandatory and taught in schools that the fear of failure is a part of success. You're going to go through things where it's called trial and error. You may make an error several times. You may have to reprogram your mind and your consciousness so that you can stop making these errors. For example, I used to, when I got my paycheck, the first thing I would do was pay my bills, go shopping, whatever I had left over, I'd save. Terrible, terrible strategy. Okay? That was that hood rich shit. You feel me? So, what I had to reprogram my mind to is first, paying myself first, saving, then paying bills. You're damn right. I'm going to save money and pay myself first before I pay somebody's bills. Okay? Shifting that particular mindset was due to the fact that I failed so many times with my prior mindset. So you may be able to identify in your life where you failed so many times in your prior mindset, and then you had to shift your thinking. You had to shift your consciousness. You had to shift the way that you do things. And oftentimes there's feelings attached to the way that we're accustomed to doing things. So we keep doing it over and over and over and over again and expecting different results until we change the way we think about things. Okay? So how does this relate to interior wealth? Well, I'm glad you asked. Interior wealth really has to do with your character, your mindset, your convictions, where you stand. It will be more important to you to stand strong in your own convictions and sense of self than it will be for you to entertain and be a part of the crowd. So once you begin to work through and master the fear of rejection and really truly learn to integrate failure into your success model, you become an individual who is more solid. Now, am I going to tell you this process is going to be some cakewalk where you're going to be happy all the time and life is going to seem great and you're never going to feel loneliness and, oh, the trees and the sun and the moon? No, I'm not going to tell you that. There are other healers out here who will sell you a healing dream. And if you're happy with that type of level of healing, totally fine. Go with it. If that's what resonates with your soul. What I come to you with is raw insight and consciousness. I am an individual who went through and transformed, self-heal, had to self-soothe, feel every emotion and pain of the feelings that I felt transitioning. Because this is not a matter of intellect as much as it is a matter of emotion. Emotion is energy in motion. So we become quite attached to certain things, certain levels of validation, and it can become extremely embarrassing to recognize just how formless and spineless your self-esteem was. That it was connected to so many things that had no ability to be sustainable over a long-term course of time. So most of the time people are dealing with embarrassment and shame, and these are the things that are blocking your healing. So you really have to get to the point where you recognize, okay, shit, I'm going to be ashamed about this for a little bit. I might be a little embarrassed about this for a little bit, but I'm going to get through it. And that is the attitude, mindset, mentality, and behavior that you need to have to develop yourself some solid self-esteem. That being said, growth and genuine connections goes right along with it. Liking yourself. Oh, that's important. As a person who's a former people pleaser and pandered for acceptance amongst individuals who I could probably take or leave right now, liking yourself is an important aspect of this type of solid self-esteem. Because we learn to like ourselves through groups, social groups. When you're in high school, everyone's pandering to be a part of the popular kids group. Okay? People feel very accomplished when they are popular. To be unpopular is almost like wearing a scarlet letter to a certain extent. Here's the thing. Just because a lot of people dig the way you carry yourself does not necessarily translate into self-esteem cues. And I used to think so until I actually started hanging around people who were considered popular. and started to realize how much of their life was conformed to the way the crowd would respond. Can you imagine that shit? You're spending your entire life determining how you're going to formulate yourself based on how your crowd of people will respond. We can see this happening more currently in social media, posting certain things for likes, posting certain things for comments and attention, posting certain things so that you can get a reaction. These are all things that I can definitely say everyone is guilty of to a certain extent, but how much of an extent is it? And so, like I said, when I hung around people who I thought was so popular and they had nothing to worry about, their entire lives was formulated based on the crowd. So who needed who? Did the crowd need them, or did they need the crowd? So liking yourself is an important part of solid self-esteem. You must get down to the root of why you don't like yourself, or why you may have trouble liking yourself. Many people told me I was too aggressive, I was too assertive, I was too vocal, too. When I pushed this away, I tried to appear more vapid, loving, unsure of myself. Now, in a ceremonial sense, this is what eased people. This is what led me down the path of people pleasing. So this eased other individuals as they were interacting with me. Okay, she's more malleable. She's more able to compromise, so on and so forth. But they would continuously cross my boundaries. Okay? Now, setting healthy boundaries is all fine, well, and good. And that works a lot of the time. But I want to be clear about how savage motherfuckers are nowadays. You can set healthy boundaries all you want to, but if a person decides that they don't respect you, they gonna try you at every turn. Have you ever dated a narcissist? Okay. If you've dated a narcissist before, I can guarantee you setting healthy boundaries is a challenge. Because these assholes will try everything they can to ensure that they cross your boundaries at every turn, no matter how many times you explain it to them, no matter how loving, no matter how firm. Eventually you get to the point where you just can't fuck with them no more. Okay? So the deal is this. When you are dealing with individuals who have high narcissistic tendencies, setting healthy boundaries is just not going to work. Sometimes you have to burn the damn bridge. You have to set a blaze. You have to set a fire. And you have to be very, very stern. Very, very immovable on certain things, because any little inch will give them the reason to believe that they can go ahead and take not only a mile, but 10 miles. Okay. Some individuals are just wired that way. It's hard for people to believe that you can deal with someone or people who just don't give a shit about your boundaries. They don't. So they will cross them at every turn. So one of the things is while I was sitting around pretending to be so nice and vapid and malleable and easygoing and so on and so forth, even though that is an aspect of my personality, when my boundaries were being crossed, I was compromising it and still pretending to be that way because I wanted to appear to be nice. Okay, so I had to get to the radical self-acceptance of, okay, they say I'm too aggressive. They say I'm too assertive. They say I'm too vocal. I'm going to receive all that. I'm going to surrender to it. Okay, I surrendered to the constant criticism. I embraced it. Okay, and I didn't embrace it easily. It was reluctantly, because these are things that I did not want to know about myself. Okay, so if you're hearing this, you know that there are things that you don't want to know about yourself. That's your shadow. The shit you repress, push away, condemn, that's your shadow. So embrace it. And they said, you're too aggressive. You're too assertive. You do this. You do that. Sure. Let me do that. And why was I afraid to embrace this? Oh, well, I thought I was going to be people repellent. Man repellent, job repellent. But what it was I was people repellent to to the people that didn't need to be in my life. I was job repellent to the jobs that didn't work for me. I was man repellent to the men that were too fragile for me. You feel me? And once I accepted who I am radically, I was able to make sense of my life. I stopped being with people, places, and things that were not actually lined up for me. So yes, of course I still get that criticism, but guess what? I'm around individuals now who garner more of a sense of respect for me. And I care more about respect than being liked. So you're going to lose, and if we could even call it a loss, in your journey for solid self-esteem, you're going to lose some of the weak and unhealthy energies that you may have grown attached to. Let them fall away. And I am making it sound easy, like it's just so super easy, because no, it's not. It was a 10-year process for me. Seriously. But ultimately, what I will say to you is that when you become more in alignment with who you truly are authentically, and your path is lined and paved with individuals who add value to your experience, you will find that your aura will expand, your peace will expand, your light will expand, and you will stop having people siphoning off of your energy or engaging in behavior that no longer serves you. All right? So this is Twilight saying peace, healing, love yourself. If you want a more specific, customized experience, then it's important that you go ahead and you book a session. That information is also in the description box. Finally, with solid self-esteem, your authentic self. This has been my buzzword for about 1.5 years now. So if you've been following me for a little while and you're not aware of how authenticity works, Authenticity is where you radically love every part of yourself, to see the good and the bad in yourself, or quote, what's considered to be bad. I will give you an example.